Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. This is episode 5, and my name's Matthew Cutler-Welsh, and with me is Zach Semke. How are you, Zach?
I'm well, thank you. How are you doing, Matthew?
I'm good. The air is relatively clear down in my part of the world here in Auckland, New Zealand, as opposed to yours, unfortunately affected, of course, by some fires up the west coast. But it is making people, I think a little bit more about air quality.
That is for sure. I think it's the terms like AQI as a measure of overall air quality is something that's become part of the lexicon for the entire population of Seattle.
Well, not to dwell on the goings on and the negatives too much, I'm really excited about this week's interview. It was a chat that I had a couple of weeks ago with Andrew Peel of Peel Passive House, and as I talk about briefly at the start, Andrew's one of those guys that has done work there's a lot of people in Passive House community who have done a lot of stuff in the background who don't necessarily make a big noise about it. And Andrew's done everything from working as a Passive House consultant, but also spending time in Darmstadt at the Passive House Institute. And he actually worked on the Passive House planning package, PHPP, which all consultants, anyone has got anything to do with Passive House would be familiar with that. So he's actually been on the ground there as part of the technical team working on that. And now Peel Passive House do everything from consulting on projects, but also assessing and helping to certify products and building systems. So let's jump into this week's episode. This is my conversation with Andrew Peel of Peel Passive House. Alrighty. Well, thank you for your time, Andrew. It's really great to have you on. You are the Passive House, I think, is one of those things that there's a lot of people who have done an incredible amount of work kind of in the background. And you're one of those people that have been involved for a little while, but have also contributed a lot, and that a lot of people probably don't realize just how much you've been involved in some of the things you've been involved with, such as spending some time at the Passive House Institute in Darmstadt, but also now being the founder, director of, as you put it on your website, one of the most experienced or the most experienced consultancies in Canada. Is that how you frame it?
Well, thanks for the acknowledgement. I've been involved in Passive House for 14 years now. It's been an incredible journey, and the journey, continues to excite me, and it's you can't really predict where it goes. But yeah, we're certainly the company I founded, Peel Passive House Consulting. We are definitely one of the most experienced firms in North America. That's evolving all the time. Well, our experience is evolving, but also we're seeing, bigger companies get into the space. We're, working on very interesting projects. So it's kind of, they're good companies getting involved, doing some great work. And so I think, I guess these claims evolve over time, right? Once we were one of the few games in shop that could really take on some of these interesting projects. I think that's now shifting, which is great, because really, when I take on my company hat and put on the more industry hat, that's where we need to get to. We need to have some of these big firms, architect firms, engineering firms, et cetera, really engaging with Passive House, and not just through competitive RFP process, but really like driving Passive House to many of their clients that they're already working with.
You're talking about industry change there. Is that going to come from industry and those larger consultancies taking on Passive House, promoting Passive House, or is it going to come from government?
I think it's a multi-front approach. I mean, ultimately, if we want everyone doing this, it's going to have to be mandated. There'll be, numerous industry laggards or just people who are with the crowd or, doing the minimum they need to. And I think without mandatory regulation, they're never going to come along. But in terms of leading proponents or, open-minded clients, I think these large firms can have an influence in their decision making. If they have if they work with clients in a repeat manner, that they've built the trust there, and they have good working processes, good relationship, collaboration. I think there's a great opportunity for them to insert Passive House into the mix, and so really empowering and skilling up these larger firms is I think a critical piece to this, and it can certainly drive change before any rally or in advance of any regulation coming.
Yeah. When you talk about doing this, what does this mean? Are you talking about all houses being Passive House certified, or is there something between where we are now and full certification?
I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a middle ground, but there's certainly, I don't envision, I don't think it's realistic that all buildings will be certified to the international Passive House standard. I think the way building codes work, the way jurisdictions define and implement requirements, I just don't think that's feasible. But what I really would love to see and hope we can get to, and that's what we're really working towards, is that the quality assurance that underlies the certification process gets embedded in the way we design and build buildings in the future. So even if you're not calling something formally a Passive House, you don't have a certificate or a stamp or whatever, that when you're and maybe you're not meeting that 15 kilowatt hours per square meter per year, that the magic space heating demand number, that you are still you're in that area of performance, and you've good reliability in actually achieving that in practice. I think that's a key defining aspect of Passive House, is that it has a track record of delivering on its promise. So you say you're going to get to this target, and through good quality, a robust quality assurance process, you do end up actually delivering that.
And how much of that assurance is to do with PHPP, the software?
I think that's a good part. I think the way both the tool is designed as well as it's used makes it a fundamental part of that process. It's not that you couldn't ultimately use another tool, but the way PHPP's been set up, it's specifically designed to be used for Passive House, low energy buildings. And I mean, you could go into more detailed discussion of what's behind that. But it's been set up, it's been validated, extensive validation through monitoring. It was also developed using dynamic software that the Passive House Institute themselves developed in the, I think, late 80s, early 90s. Well, it predated the actual institute, but that the work there that led into the development of PHPP. There's, you can use dynamic modeling tools. There's more opportunity for not necessarily error, but just like the types of assumptions you make or your approach to modeling. So PHPP kind of narrows down the band, and has developed an approach that works very well for buildings they're aiming for Passive House or near Passive House.
Now, you're very qualified to talk about Passive House planning package, PHPP, and other modeling type solutions. Take us back to how you got involved in Passive House in the first place, because you trained as an electrical engineer, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. And I just had, because early in my career, had a strong interest in renewable energy. This is before really knowing much at all about buildings. And
was that why you did electrical engineering in the first place? Because you wanted to play with windmills?
No, that came later. And my program certainly didn't expose me to renewable energy,
Right.
or not in any meaningful way. And so it just developed naturally. I've always had a bit of an environmental leaning. I remember being a kid wanting to recycle stuff or
Hmm.
reuse things. So that's been there as a thread throughout my life. Not that I was, an environmental activist or anything, but renewable energy really appealed to me as a, clean way of providing energy. I was starting to learn more about climate change at the time. And never, not that anyone's ever a fan of local air pollution.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I really wanted to get into renewable energy, and there weren't any opportunities at the time in Canada. This is back in 2004 or five, or more broadly in North America. And so I started to look further afield and decided, okay, well, to get into this field, I'm going to need to do a master's program. And that's what led me to finding a program in Germany. And that was a great program. But during the masters, this kind of philosophical debate raged in my head, and I realized at some point, well, it makes more sense in my mind to try to save a kilowatt hour than find different ways of producing it.
Right.
And that led me into the building energy efficiency area. And through research, came across the Pasos Institute, which at the time had quite a piddly website. Even today, their website's not that impressive, but at least it has more presence. Back then, it was. I mean, who are these guys?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of it is. It's more about the substance rather than the sizzle.
Exactly, and totally, and so they very much focus on the substance,
Yeah.
and that is great, and it has an impact in terms of people being drawn to it. So they've definitely needed some support from external partners, such as the North American Pasos Network and others around different parts of the world, to promote Passive House in more effective ways. But I mean, in a way, I respect that they are scientists at heart.
Yeah.
And not that they fully stay in their lane, but like that's what they're good at. That's what they focus
Yeah.
on, and they've recognized that partnering with others around the world is how they can really promote and accelerate adoption of the standard.
And that really so often gets quoted as the strength of Passive House is the science behind it, the verification, the predictability, that it's not just opinion, and it's not even just. I mean, there's a bit of a stoush brewing here at the moment about one of our local rating tools, because it's based a lot on consultation with the industry, and there's a at the core of that debate is science versus opinion. Because you've also been involved where you spent some time at BRE working on Code for Sustainable Homes in the UK. How was that experience?
That was interesting experience. So, I mean, for those who aren't familiar with the Code for Sustainable Homes, this was a standard that developed sort of mid 2000s in response to the UK government's or the government of the day, their announcement that by 2016 all new homes would be zero carbon. So they developed this standard, which was kind of a let's say a small residential version of the BREEAM standard. So it covered more than just energy.
So what year was this?
2006, 7, around that time.
So they were projecting out a decade into the future, which is now the past. To say by
Indeed,
2016,
yes.
we want all houses to be carbon neutral.
Yeah, exactly. And so so we worked very much on the energy side in my team. There are other aspects, other groups or whatever that were working on other water efficiency and whatnot. And so we, as part of that, you use the national calculation methodology, which is in the UK SAP, Standard Assessment Procedure, which is a fairly detailed energy model. It's I think it was the first one developed in the world, and so it's a good methodology and tool. It was definitely geared more towards existing buildings, new conventional construction. So it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't focused on high performance buildings, but we were using it in that capacity. There were limitations though, because as new interesting technologies came to market, the methodology wasn't really set up to deal with these new technologies. So actually, not really a side gig, another key role I played when I was at BRE was managing this low carbon technology scheme. It was a contract we had on behalf of with the UK government. And essentially that any company that developed a new technology and that was claiming carbon savings in residential buildings, they would have to go through this scheme to assess the validity of their claims. So essentially, we developed test and calculation methodologies to assess these new systems and technologies, and then from that, we were able to embed those methodologies into the energy modeling methodology,
right,
and thereby account for their performance.
Yeah. Where did that all end up? Because obviously, I don't think all houses are carbon neutral now. What happened to that program?
Well, it was world's leading program or initiative, and unfortunately, with a change of government in the UK in I think 2009 or 10, that government actually retracted the policy. Somewhat controversially at the time, but it became much more controversial later. When they made the announcement, it wasn't really clear, the whole rationale. They have their explanation for why, but it came to light later that there was a lot of lobbying of the government by certain developers and builders wanting to take away remove the policy. But interestingly, it wasn't a clear-cut debate, because some of the leading big national builders in the UK were supportive of the program. They were actually actively doing building demonstration projects to test, to build to the top levels of the code that were going to be required in 2016. So there were voices in the industry on both sides, of builders, but unfortunately the builders that won out were the ones that were against the policy. And then it came out later. Well, as part of this, it came out that the company that was the loudest opponent, they ended up making record profits over the succeeding years. And their one of the strongest arguments they used, or biggest arguments, was that it was going to cost too much to actually build to these standards. So you have that disconnect between saying it's going to cost too much and then at the end making record profits. Unfortunately, the losers are the homeowners of those probably hundreds of thousands of homes that were built, because they would build. I don't know, it was 80, 100,000 homes a year. I could have the numbers wrong by now, but it's a substantial amount of homes.
A lot.
Right?
Yeah.
So big missed opportunity.
Where do you see the future of things like Code for Sustainable Homes, LEED for homes, even Energy Star fitting in amongst other standards like Passive House?
There'll always be a place for them. Energy Star is more geared towards doing a bit better than code. Typically, it's 10, 20, 25% better. And LEED for homes, it's broader than Passive House. So we've had projects that certified both LEED and Passive House. So it covers more than just energy and other things that Passive House covers, like comfort and indoor air quality. So I think there's always a place for it until such time as the building code were to embed most, if not all, of the requirements in such standards.
Yeah, it's and then you have taking that even further. You got things like Living Building Challenge, which are complete sustainability ratings that look at a whole raft of stuff. So it's interesting to see how those either compete. Do you see them as competing against each other, or do they play nicely with each other?
I mean, there's certainly alignment there, and there's been a gradual move for alignment. So, for instance, LEED for Homes in the US now recognizes Passive House. So if you achieve Passive House, they'll give you, I think, full credits on their energy or the majority of credits. I don't know the details exactly. Living Building Challenge, I don't know the most up-to-date developments, but there's been discussions between Living Future Institute and Passive House, I think the Passive House Institute or North American Passive House Network, for alignment there. So there's definitely opportunity for alignment, because this is the thing, like all these parties, all these standards, they're driving towards the same goal, just have different approaches to achieving that, and it makes most sense to align our efforts because there are enough people who aren't doing this or opposed to this, and our energies are best spent pushing the general agenda forward as opposed to competing.
Yeah. So you spent a few years in the UK. You were one of only 4 authorised Passive House certifiers at the time, and then came back home to Ontario. What was it like? What did you think of the building industry when you returned back to Ontario?
It's just a different take on the standard way of doing things, right? Different construction methods, but in general, in terms of the average quality of construction, it still leaves a lot to be desired, right?
Yeah.
You can
in general, or in comparison to what you'd seen in Europe.
We could draw more parallels or comparison between the UK and Canada. In Germany, there's probably a general higher level of quality. They still have builders who are doing the minimum. But yeah, we've compared more UK to Canada. It's just that not race to the bottom, but there's just enough builders who just they want to do the minimum. They're very much focused on profit. I mean, we saw some. I don't like. And the problems show up differently, right? So in the UK, we actually are part of a study by the BRE that looked at installation of heat recovery ventilation systems, and you just had ridiculous. And these weren't passive house; these were kind of new build, conventional construction. That you had ducts that weren't even connected to vents, so they had your ventilation air just blowing in the attic.
Wow.
And you're just like, how does this pass building inspection? How does this and we have the same different issues here with stuff passing building inspection somehow. The building inspector might be very particular about certain things that don't really make a difference, and yet it can miss some big obvious things because maybe they're not familiar with what you're looking at, or so yeah, just a different flavor of the same problems.
Right. So issues, maybe different issues, but still with issues. You started out as a electrical engineer. You're not an architect, and you haven't been a builder. What do you see as the role for people like yourself, engineers, consultants in the industry? And is it hard for you, particularly at the start? I mean, you've got a great reputation now with all the work you've done. But is it hard for people who aren't architects or who haven't worked on building sites to get into the industry and have a really positive influence?
There's certainly challenges. I mean, the number of projects are increasing exponentially in North America. I think other places in the world as well. Right now, more projects tend to be going to the experienced firms. That tends to happen. You start early, you make a name for yourself, and then people tend to want to find you. But as the number of projects expands, I think there'll be more opportunity. And I think the construction is going this way, and firms need support. So whether it's going to be as a Passivhaus consultant working directly for a design firm like an architect practice or an engineering firm, or acting as an external consultant to teams, because every firm works differently. Some architect firms want expertise in house, others are happy to subconsult that or subcontract that. So there'll be growing opportunities for sure. And I mean, we're gonna need more. Both designers and particularly tradespeople, actually.
Yeah. And you certainly have made a name for yourself. Give us a rundown of all the services that Peel Passivhaus offers and the other stuff that you're involved with.
Sure. So we have, I'd say, 4 main services. First is Passivhaus Consulting. So this is supporting design and construction teams throughout the project lifespan, or at least through occupancy, commissioning, potentially sometimes after occupancy as well, with really designing a building to the Passivhaus standard. Typically we like to get involved with projects that are certifying. I can speak more about why that is, but even projects that have the aim of achieving the standard without certifying. We don't get involved with better than code projects like Energy Star or just doing a bit different. We want to really work on projects that are doing the things that every project should be doing today, but will be having to do in the future. Mm-hmm. So there's consulting. We do also Passivhaus building certification, and that is, similar to LEED certification. We're accredited by the Passivhaus Institute in Germany, so we can take a project through the certification process fully and issue certificates on behalf of the institute. And that includes project support. So it's not just give us the documents and we'll check that things are okay. We generally work actively with the project team to ensure things remain on track. And so we like to get involved and advise clients to hire the certifier early on so that you can have that dialogue with them. It saves a lot of headache and cost actually to do that. The cost savings and headache savings can be noticeable, particularly depending on the size of the project. Yeah, so there's building certification. There is training. We actually launched North America's first online training platform for Passivhaus. So that was probably 3 years ago now. So we were certainly ahead of the curve.
Pre-COVID, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's interesting because it never took off to, I wouldn't have called it a major success. And I think people were not as ready for virtual training, but the game has changed now. But of course, with that have come, more people into this space. So that's an interesting, interesting development. But yeah,
I'll just quickly mention as part of that, you've got not just the standard Passivhaus designer or consultant training. You've got other modules like how to use PHPP, which I think is incredibly useful because you don't necessarily get taught that in the standard designer consultant training.
Yeah, and this is something because we actually, I helped co-found Passivhaus Canada and was a director for a while, and we really helped shape their curriculum because we saw an issue as building certifiers in the quality of PHPPs that people were completing. And so we wanted to address that head on. And so we developed this course and have licensed it to Passivhaus Canada to get it out there more broadly as well, to train people properly in PHPP. And we certainly see a difference there because that typical, usually in your Passivhaus designer course, you get exposed for maybe half a day.
Yeah.
And people fiddle with the software and then they think they know how to use it and learn on their first project that they don't. And it was causing a lot of headaches for everyone, ourselves, the consultants, as well as the clients as they were going through certification. Yeah. So we really developed that to address many of those issues that have come up. And the great thing is, it's been online in a virtual self-paced version or format for some time. So we've had, people from New Zealand, as an example, enroll in the course because they can, they can take it at their own pace at any.
So you got the training, and then what else have you got?
And then the fourth major service is component certification. So that's working with, for instance, window manufacturers and suppliers to assess the performance of their product line and see, do they meet Passivhaus requirements, because these are manufacturers that would be interested in supplying products to Passivhaus projects, but the consultants aren't necessarily able to specify their products because they don't have the data necessary to do that. So we help them with the assessment, as well as if their products aren't meeting requirements, then we'll work with them to design, refine, or improve their products, or in some cases start from scratch and develop a new product line. And this is great, interesting work because it doesn't just impact Passivhaus projects. Now they're able to have this product line now that they can supply to other projects that are interested in in high performance and obviously things like Windows, HRV systems are critical to the building performance. And the great thing is, now that we see larger manufacturers get involved, they're contacting us for their service. It's an indicator they really see this market as legitimate, and they're willing to invest to bring these products to market.
Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you for any of those services, but also if they just want to connect?
Sure. I mean, either through the website, peelpassivehouse.ca, so that's PEEL, Passivhaus, the English spelling, .ca, or my email, andrew@peelpassivehouse.ca, same as the URL. So those are best ones. Or you can look for me on LinkedIn as well.
Cool. And you hang out in the Passivhaus Accelerator pretty regularly too. In fact, you've presented. You were on the episode number 5, and I highly recommend going and checking out that project. That was the first. It was the first in the world car dealership that's Passivhaus certified.
Correct. Yeah. And
interesting.
And
project.
In a cold climate, that was probably the most challenging project I've worked on.
Yeah, hot cars potentially in a cold climate, and all the challenges that go along with that. But people can check that out at the on the Passivhaus Accelerator
Indeed.
home on page. Hey, it's been awesome chatting, Andrew. I really admire your journey, and it's quite inspiring, and the things that you've done since getting involved in Passivhaus and the direction that you are helping to take the whole industry, certainly in Canada, but I think that influence is spreading out around the world as well. So thank you, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you for the opportunity. And really, I mean, it's. I think a key thing is here is it's operating within a commitment, to the built environment, to better buildings. And when you have that a goal or commitment greater than yourself, then you act in alignment with that. And so that's I've picked Passivhaus as my thing I pursue and support among many things that we could support, and privileged that I'm able to be involved in an industry that now people are actually taking note and really starting to apply Passivhaus. So it's been it's a rewarding journey.
And that was Andrew Peel of Peel Passivhaus. What did you think of that one, Zach?
Well, I mean, Andrew is a inspiring character, as you were alluding to in the intro. There are folks who are change makers in this space, and Andrew is passionate about the building transformation that we need to make happen for climate mitigation, and that I think that came through today, but also in previous conversations, and we've got an interview on a Q&A style interview on the Passive House Accelerator with Andrew as well, and that his journey from electrical engineering through to renewable energy, and then to helping to build the tools for passive house design. And now I think he's at a place where just on a personal level, he's really bringing his head up and looking at how he can help bring this form of design and construction to a broader audience. So
yeah.
It's great to hear, great to see.
One of the great things of being an early adopter like Andrew and implementing, bringing ideas back from Europe into North America is that you get to do a lot of firsts. And that was, I think, the topic of the happy hour presentation was the first car garage, the first car yard.
It's the first. So he did the first, and this is the April 15th episode of the happy hour, and we have a video of it if you're curious. But he did the first Passive House certified car dealership in the world, which is a Subaru dealership in Red Deer. I'm forgetting the province. Shame on me. Anyway, it's so he's dealing with really interesting problems in that project. With
I hadn't thought about it until I
coming.
looked at that. I hadn't actually realized just how complex that is, because you're dealing with a really cold climate in wintertime, but you're filling up usually a pretty big glass box with things that can get really, really hot. And you've just got a whole bunch of issues there when you start thinking about how do I deal with the thermal performance, all that glass, because people want to look into a car's showroom, but also it's not just the showroom, it's the garage, and you've got all these fumes and dealing with petrol.
Exactly.
In some way, you could think of that a little bit skeptically as we've got a classic case here of an airport who's wanting to become carbon neutral, and there's tempting to think, well, what's sustainable about cars, but I think it's bigger than that. It's thinking about, we're going to have this operation of a building for this purpose. It'll probably transition to electric vehicles fairly soon anyway. How can we make the actual operation of this business as sustainable and also healthy as a place to be and as a place to come and visit? How can we make it as good as possible? So I think it's exciting to see those types of projects come about. And he does have some great images of that, plus all the other work that they're involved in on their website. And definitely check out that episode of the happy hour too. One other thing I'd really like to highlight from Andrew's experience was his work in the UK, but also elsewhere on other rating tools. And he's done a lot of work with the Code for Sustainable Homes and other energy modeling, and also work around carbon technologies and rating tools. And I think it's really important for us to realize that there are these other, they're rating tools as opposed to a standard, and they can coexist, and there's a place for them both, or for all of these types of they're tools. They're tools to help us design better buildings, and they incorporate different things. So it's really useful to come across people who have worked in all those areas.
Absolutely. I think not only can they coexist, but I think that they can really complement one another. The Passive House is very clear about having this laser focus on energy performance and indoor air quality. And that so there's a real depth there, and we all know that's so vital for climate resilience of buildings, but also climate mitigation through buildings. But to pair that with a certification like LEED that has a much kind of broader, more you could argue holistic approach to sustainability, can be really powerful. And LEED at times has been criticized for its on the energy side, but if you have a LEED and passive house approach, then you're hitting a lot of points. And then if you do something like, the Living Building Challenge, for example, has crosswalks between both the PHI and the FIAS version of passive house certification.
I think we should get a Living Building Challenge expert on the show sometime and dive into that, because there's a lot to discuss there.
Yeah, there is.
Hey, there's a lot of stuff going on around the place at the moment. So you want to give us a quick rundown, Zach?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Passive House Accelerator, one piece of big news is that we have welcomed on Passive House Buildings magazine and books as part of the accelerator. So Passive House Buildings has merged with the accelerator. So we're going to be really excited to share a bunch of original content produced by Mary James and her team moving forward on the accelerator. So that's the kind of forefront on my mind. There's also just yesterday when this podcast airs, it will have been yesterday, Sunday, that the first keynote from the International Passive House Conference occurred, and the conference is going to be going on for a few weeks, starting this week. So I will in the show notes include a link to that information. But this is a really important opportunity to learn a ton about Passive House and what's going on around the world.
This is the brave new world of conferences that go on for weeks, right? Instead of us all flying to Germany or China for 4 days.
Exactly, and I think I think it's a smart model to not subject us to full, long, 8-hour days in front of the screen, but instead to break these experiences up into digestible chunks. Yeah. So that's what the folks at PHI and IFA have done. So I'm really looking forward to taking it in. There's also a Building Energy conference. The Building Energy NYC conference is happening September 23rd and 24th. That's produced by Nessie. So that's a must see. And we have a bunch of ongoing Passive House and building science virtual gatherings that I have information about that I'll share in the show notes, as well as a number of different classes that are coming up. So as always, there's tons going on in the world, and we're trying to organize that information. We also have the South Pacific Passive House Conference around the corner.
Yeah.
So lots of good stuff.
And both of those, as just mentioned, make sure you share those amongst your friends, because they've got virtual expos, which you don't necessarily need to be partaking in the main conference to go to those. So, check them out. And they're really great ways of just showing other people what's going on virtually in the world of Passive House. Awesome. Really exciting stuff happening with the accelerator. And definitely join us each week for the happy hour, particularly if you're in a conducive time zone. But it's such a great place to hang out and hear from people. So definitely.
Absolutely. I forgot to announce what's coming up this week for the happy hour. Oh my gosh. So thank you for that prod. So Bill Hayward of the Hayward Score is presenting, and this is really timely for those of us on the West Coast who are we're dealing with all this air quality issues because of wildfires. But I think it's, I know that if it were 6 months ago, that would have been the case for you all. So the Hayward Score is this way of through a survey and AI algorithms to assess the health of a home. And Bill Hayward has done 77,000 of these assessments on homes across the United States. and from that experience, has insights to share about how to harness Passive House to create healthy homes. And he's also embarked on a project to survey Passive House homeowners and apartment dwellers to build the case for the benefits of Passive House on for health. So lots of good stuff, and also an opportunity to get engaged in that effort of his.
I love it when researchers and people from other areas come up with a problem and that they're trying to solve, and they find out that Passive House is the solution.
Yeah, definitely. He has a great personal story. I mean, it started, with some serious health conditions caused by a sick building syndrome in a home that he was in. So he has a very kind of he has a personal journey that he's gone through that brought him to Passive House. Actually, he lives in a Passive House now, and is actually I think building a new one and applying. So Passive House just automatically gets you way down the road on health, and there are things that you can add to Passive House practice, or kind of concepts that you can keep in mind as you're designing homes to bring it to even a higher level. And that's part of what some of the insights that he can share with us.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for that, Zach, and thank you everyone else for listening. Also, shout out to Sydney, who helps out on the production side. Sydney is our what's her title, Zach?
She's the production assistant for the podcast. Yeah, she does
a fantastic job. We couldn't get all this put together without her working in the background. Who else do we need to thank?
Yeah, so the podcast is a production of Passive House Accelerator, and all of our work is made possible by our sponsors. So I want to thank our founding sponsors, Baxt Ingwe Architects, Mitsubishi Electric, RDH Building Science, StoCorp, and Zola Windows, as well as our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, or the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So thank you very much, sponsors.
And thank you, Zach Simke. My name's Matthew Cutler-Welsh, and this has been the podcast, the Passive House podcast. Thanks for listening in. Please, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and also leave us a rating and review if you're listening in Apple iTunes. It really helps other people find the show and grow our audience. And tell other people about the show as well, and get them to subscribe wherever they listen to their podcasts. We're on most of the normal channels or whatever app you use for listening in. Thanks very much. We've got great episodes coming up, so do keep subscribed, keep up to date on the Passive House Accelerator website, and we'll be back again next week.